Niall. I'm a secure design consultant at Go4 Finland, and I am honored to have been given the opportunity to talk to you today about this topic, which I am going to discuss with you, which is your organization ready to be an X-Road member? And I am not going to go into the technical details of X-Road. I'm sure all of the other presentations will in some way touch those. I'm going to focus more on the nature of the organization, which is already an X-Road member or which is aspiring to be an X-Road member. So you may be familiar with this ecosystem diagram. As you can see, we have the X-Road operator, the owner of the ecosystem, we have the service provider, and we have the service consumer. And we have contracts between these entities or parties in X-Road, and they in effect constitute the ecosystem of X-Road. But what I would like to talk to you more about today is the fact that X-Road actually does not exist in a vacuum. It's existing between and within these organizations who are members or aspiring members of X-Road. And that is what I want to focus on today, is how these organizations can be better prepared overall, holistically, to be current or aspiring X-Road members. I'm talking about the higher level holistic organizational ecosystem. And here you can see in the red bubbles that these are physical organizations. They have buildings, they have doors, they have people working in them, they have data rooms and things like that. And therefore, we need to think in a bigger picture about, okay, so these are X-Road members, but how are they actually fulfilling their organizational duties in terms of the overall information security? Organizations differ from country to country, and country cultures differ. So, organizational readiness in Finland and Estonia might be entirely different to what is considered organizational readiness in other parts of the world. What is considered being ready in terms of risk and things like that is considered different culturally as well. So we would like to actually encourage organizations to be prepared in a better way overall in terms of assets, information and the roles, and third parties, risks, continuity and recovery. I will go into these individually now. So assets are tangible and intangible. You have people. These are the most important assets in your company or organization. And if they are X-Road operators or something like that, then how are these assets being managed in your organization? We have information which is also paper-based and digital information. A lot of the X-Road information is digital, but of course there may also be paper-based information as well. And how is that managed and controlled? And is it classified and how is it protected? And we have roles and responsibilities as well. For example, senior management in a service provider or service consumer is ultimately responsible for the information security of their organization. But the tasks of running the daily operations are delegated down the line to the employees and personnel. And how is this done in a controlled way? For example, is there separation of duties enforced for certain tasks that require more than one person to do that task? Then we have second and third parties. As you can see from these bubbles, we have contracts between these entities in X-Road. So are these being reviewed on some annual basis or some periodic basis? What are the service level agreements? Is there paper-based information around these contracts, and how is that paper-based information stored and protected? Then we're talking about a big one, risks. So risks affect everyone inside and out of work. But risks can make or break an organization. And many organizations don't do a very good job of understanding the risks that affect them. Many organizations fail to do a risk analysis on some periodic level, recording the risks, identifying the controls to mitigate those risks, and following up on those. So for example, if an aspiring or current X-Road member hasn't been monitoring the risks that affects the business, how could that affect X-Road in some way negatively? So there will be an impact if the organization is heavily affected by some risk. For example, going out of business because of some very major risk. That, of course, affects their ability to supply X-Road services. And then that brings us on to continuity and recovery. Does your organization have a business continuity plan? Is it preparing for the worst case scenario? Does it have mitigations in place? And then how does it actually launch the recovery procedures in practice? If they're not documented or they haven't been thought about, it's very difficult to recover an organization if something goes wrong. That brings us on then to, well, what should we do about that now that we have identified the risks and things that might go wrong? Well, we should actually have a set of heterogeneous controls for defense in depth. Heterogeneous means a variety, basically. So we have administrative controls, we have technical controls, and physical controls. And the most important, I would say, administrative control is actually senior management commitment. So senior management is willing to budget and set aside a time and resources for improving the information security management system of the organization. If we take, for example, that an organization wants to become an X-Road member, and there are many resources committed to that, but outside of that, the organization information security is not being taken care of, then of course, that is a weakness, because security is end to end, it's like a chain, and one weak link, that's the weakest link in the chain. There's also the issue of people management and controls around risks that affect employees and visitors. And well, let's say if you have subcontractors in your company, how are they being managed in terms of information security? And policies, guidelines, and procedures, that's something that they are things that need to be documented. If they're not documented, they don't exist in the eyes of an information security auditor. So many small companies have not documented their information security policy. They have not documented guidelines and procedures for how to do information security in a controlled way. Many small organizations don't train their employees in security awareness. So they don't have an annual security awareness campaign that might involve several hours of training and a survey, for example. And also roles and responsibilities. Well, are the data owners identified? Are data custodians identified? How is information being managed throughout the information data flow and things like that? And then we have technical controls. We have the hardware and the software and the network and confidentiality, integrity, and availability. How are they being controlled and managed inside the company? Are the controls documented for these, and are they being reviewed on some periodic basis? And last but not least, we have the physical controls. Because we're dealing with organizations here, they're real physical entities. You have buildings, you have the infrastructure, and you have access controls in and out of those buildings for both employees, visitors, contractors, and that. So these are the things that you need to look at for some heterogeneous defense in depth. I'm not asking you to kind of go and pursue a heavy ISO 21001 certification program to solve all of this in one big bang. That's a very heavy kind of effort, requires a lot of resources in that. But what I would encourage current X-Road members and aspiring X-Road members to do is to start with low-hanging fruits for the quick wins. So what are your long-term information security ambitions and targets outside of X-Road, but within your organization? Because as I said, X-Road exists within and between organizations. So you should start defining your information security management system baseline now. If you haven't already done so, you should start by simply documenting what you have in your company in terms of assets, tangible and intangible. You should sort or prioritize those in terms of criticality and start dealing with the most critical ones. X-Road, of course, is one in itself. but it's like end-to-end and self-contained. But what are your other critical assets that affect your organization? You should document the accountabilities in your organization. Who are the data owners, data custodians? How is information flow controlled? Certainly, risks should be documented. As said, many organizations fail to document their risks, and therefore the controls are unknown for how to mitigate a risk when something goes wrong. And risks should be reviewed on some periodic basis. Even annually is better than nothing. Make sure you document your information security policy and related procedures, and make sure that those are known to all the employees. There's no good in documenting these and then just having them in some archive or repository and nobody has read them and doesn't know what they say and how they should comply with those policies. And remember what I said, policies and procedures that are not documented do not exist from the point of view of an auditor. And classify and label your data. What is restricted data? What is the confidential data? What is the public data? Keep it simple. You don't need a military level hierarchy of data classifications if you're not a military service provider. Be incident response ready. This goes very much hand in hand with all that has come before this, particularly for the risks documentation and associated controls. And review your security health on some periodic basis, at least annually. So as said, just pick things out of these that you can start with and do them over time moving forward so that if and when you choose to be certified to ISO 27001, then you will have a lot of the groundwork and heavy lifting already done. It won't be such an onerous task to become information security standard compliant at that point. And thank you for listening. I hope this got you thinking a bit more broader than X-Road. It's related, but it's a little bit outside of it, but it's still very much organization relevant. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Sorry, do I pronounce your name Niall? Is that right?
Niall.
Niall.
Yeah, it's okay. I've been called many things.
No doubt. Pardon me. Just a simple Australian convict, so we are not very good with anything outside of the norm for us. But thank you, sir. Very interesting presentation, getting us thinking about all the topics around. It's not just about making a connection and a TCP/IP or something like that. It's everything that goes around that in your organization.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, let's go. Okay, let's start. Let's go in the deep end with the questions. What do you feel? Now you listed. Sorry, pardon me. I'll start again. You listed a whole bunch of stuff. Now we talked about organizational issues. We talked about policies. We talked about backup and recovery. We talked about who's the owner. We talked about this organizational stuff. But down at the level of technical and physical, how do you feel technical and physical changes when it comes to X-Road in the cloud? Do you think that it could actually be a positive, or do you think that it poses different challenges? Let's discuss that.
Cloud service providers do have very strong security policies of their own. And of course, they should be complied with by organizations that are X-Road members or aspiring to be. So anything that's in the cloud should follow those cloud security policies and of course the requirements around fulfilling those. And that should be kind of part of the organizational overall data security and information security in general. Anyway.
Okay. Sure. Okay. So they're factors, but it takes away some factors, but adds in other factors. So you don't see it as sort of more or less than, say, hosting it all on site.
I would say that, of course, hosting data on site, you need to take care of that, but you also need to be aware of that your data in the cloud is also your asset. So cloud service providers are responsible for the infrastructure, but the data in the cloud, of course, is the responsibility of the organization. And therefore, it is an asset that needs to be protected using a framework of some kind, such as, for example, the one provided, the 27001 ISO standard. You don't have to go and pursue the standard, but you can at least comply with that in terms of protecting the cloud data from the point of view of the organization.
Okay, that's an interesting topic to come to. That, yeah, okay, the setup of the servers, the access to those, the remote access, the administration, that's still on you. That doesn't change in the cloud, does it?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. What do you think is, of all the issues that you listed organizational, you listed physical, you listed technical, of all the factors that are there, I think a lot of them we hadn't thought about as such. Like, I think particularly the organizational and administrative are not something that's typically the first thing we think of, though. But of those huge lists, what would you count as the top one or two security risks amongst all of the things that you said?
I would say that the top risks would be that it all begins with the top senior management, that they need to be committed to provide the resources to ensure that an organization is resourced and has the budget and everything set aside for securing the overall organizational data, and the awareness goes around that. And I would say the other thing is people. So that's often also not considered as being a security risk as such, but things like awareness by employees and contractors as well about the company policies and complying with those policies. That I think are the two most important things that are outside of the technical things.
Interesting. I would tend to agree with you on that one. I was attending another conference the other day devoted to cybersecurity, and of course, everyone at the cybersecurity conference is talking about this technical thing, and we've got that firewall and these ways that we've technically secured all of our people. And then they said, well, we've got to do some training. Well, we make a training course, and there's this training course they've complied to. And it was interesting, and it's a more typical way to deal with it. But there was one speaker from one company who spoke of the leadership that needs to come from senior management, and that it's not just, okay, have we checkbox? Yes, we've done this training course and we've done the once a year thing and they've completed 20 hours of cybersecurity training. That he spoke that it was a much more holistic leadership level thing to instill that at all levels of the organization. And it just, when I heard it, it just struck me like a freight train. Like, this is it. This is it. It's not about just checkboxing 20 hours on a training budget. It's about strongly being provided leadership from senior management. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. That was the reason why I stressed senior management commitment yesterday. It has to flow downwards. Water flows downhill, not uphill. So the commitment has to flow down through the organization. And people will take it seriously when they understand that senior management is committed, and they take it seriously. And when senior management takes on board information security risk management as part of business risk management, in that it's not a separate thing, it's part of the overall business risk management, then people will understand that this is of critical importance to the organization.
Are you finding that is difficult? I mean, typical senior management, they're very important people. They've got a lot of thoughts on their mind, and they're like, oh, yeah, the cybersecurity, do the firewall, it's done. Do you find that, how, in your experience, how easy or difficult has it been to get that level of buy-in and commitment from senior management?
In my own experience, where I work now, actually we're quite a transparent company and quite a flat organization in a way. So senior management are very accessible in the first place. They also understand the importance of embedding and integrating security into the overall business. So it has not been a problem from my own perspective right now. But of course, in many other companies, particularly perhaps traditional hierarchical companies, it may not be easy to get your message up through a hierarchy to senior management that this is important. They may otherwise be preoccupied with other things, and that can be an issue.
I agree. It can be difficult to explain the risks to them, and then also explain, hey, here's what's going to happen if there's a breach or an issue, and I assure you, it ain't gonna be cheap for you.
Yeah, it's very hard to sell security. Security is kind of something that managers might not immediately be able to see the kind of impact and the benefit of. But when something goes wrong and terribly wrong, and that there's something out in the media about an incident or event involving that company, as you're aware of from the media in general, it happens quite regularly, then they start to understand the monetary impact, the reputational impact, especially their customers are looking at them as well from, okay, can we trust this company with our business? So it all goes back to kind of the overall big picture of making sure your organization is trustworthy holistically.
Okay. There was a great question here that I felt was very insightful. And as you look around the whole industry, not just your organization, but also across borders as well, do you see some correlation or connection between culture as it comes to deal with security? Or a kind of a follow-on question to add to that, if you broadly look across, I don't know, even let's say the European Union, I don't know, something like this, does more or less does more legislation mean secure companies, or does less legislation but means companies get it better? What's the connection between amounts of legislation and overall preparedness and culture of companies in your observation?
In my observation, I can mention one, for example, the GDPR,
okay,
General Data Protection Regulation. Before that, many companies did not really take care of personally identifiable information so well. They didn't ensure that they were handling personal details of customers and employees so well. And it took that kind of regulation to coerce or encourage companies to comply and correct how they've been handling personal information. And I would say like it's a little bit of a carrot and stick, you know. The stick is the GDPR and the regulation, but of course that is also encouraging the companies or the organizations to do self-improvement. And of course that then helps in turn the overall information security standards that the company wants to reach for itself. So when they comply with GDPR or comply with ISO 27001 framework, even though they don't intend to pursue certification yet, then of course that's something that helps them along the way tremendously.
All right, very good. We'll need to leave it there. Niall, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.